To share today is on messengers, but in particular, challenging messengers. I know I've been talking about welcoming and messengers the last couple of weeks, and I really want to speak to challenging messengers because they do show up and they do bubble up in meditation, in your waking life when you're, doing the dishes or, you know, in the past, maybe driving, maybe now it's doing certain things, activities at home. You can get in different states of mind and, random memories might show up or emotions. I think now more than ever, we're invited to spend a lot of time with ourselves, which for some of you might be very natural and you might really enjoy it. For others of you, it might be a bit more challenging. If you haven't ever been on a silent retreat, this sheltering might feel like a silent retreat in the way that you're forced to be with yourself in ways that you are not used to. And, in that, and with that being said, there are going to be moments that are really difficult and really challenging, and that might even seem a bit too much to hold. And to that, I say, that's okay. Me too. You're human. I guarantee you that everybody on this call has experienced an emotion or a thought that was very intense and overwhelming. It is only, again, human. So I think the first part of working with challenging messengers in meditation or in life is to recognize that it's natural and that it's happening to all of us, and maybe even now collectively more than ever. So if you were to ever have kind of a loving kindness practice or, kind of softening maybe a critical or judgmental mind, if that's your tendency, you might realize, we're all doing the best that we can here, you included. So the first thing that I consider as a great tool for challenging messengers is to just recognize that it's okay. It's natural and it's happening. And it might be happening in varying grades of intensity. So once you recognize it's okay, what you'll also start to notice, and that can be helpful, is to remember that these messengers that are challenging are moving. They're in motion and they're not going to stay fixed. They might appear that way and they might seem to be very captivating and dramatic, and they might seem to like park it, like where they're not going to move for a long period of time. An example of that might be feeling a particular emotion, for instance, like grief. You might think that there's a certain expiration date on, say, your grief, or it might be your anger or your sadness or your joy. It could be anything. But to remember that, yes, it is happening in me, these emotions, these thoughts, these beliefs. So they will go through this 5 phases of nature, of change. They'll have a birth moment, that initial moment. They'll have a growth moment where they become a bit more intense. I think when we talked about messengers last week, this is the moment like where it's calling your attention. You're kind of noticing it now. You might have not noticed it in that initial birth moment, but you will notice it in the growth. And I promise you, you'll notice it in the peak. So I think of the 5 phases as more like a wave. So at the top of the wave, we have this peak. It's so dramatic, it's intense, and it fully has our attention. And this is where we might be convinced that it's not going to change, that this grief I feel or this anger might be all consuming, and that it's not going to move, it's not going to change. And I promise it will. Because after that peak, it's going to naturally downslope. So it's going to have a slow decline. This might look like surrender or letting go or beginning to formulate like a right action that might, need to be taken here. Maybe it's allowing a particular emotion to have a voice, and that might be tears or crying. You might have a therapeutic yelling session. If you want to be a little gentler, you might chant or sing. So there might be a kind of a right action that some of these challenging messengers are asking you to take, or wanting just to have space to continue to move, to eventually kind of move out of the system, to be fully digested. So this will go through this 5 phases. So you might watch that in meditation, in particular with our breath and our body sensations. So you might come into a thing that might start to soften and become more diffuse. Um, in the breathing pattern, you can see it, right? The inhalation, it's like a birth. It's at the peak, the top of the inhalation is that stabilization point, and in that little down slope, and at the end is the exhale and the bottom of exhale. So we have to remember that these challenging messengers are happening in us, and we are part of nature. So they will go through these 5 phases. I find the more you give attention to these challenging messengers in a loving, befriending way, like in yoga nidra and in meditation practices, the intensity softens. It's quite an amazing thing to watch how that transformational process happens on its own, just with the continued attention that you'll give it. Another way to welcome challenging messengers is to work with an inner resource or a safe space. This is a sense of like relaxation, well-being. I like to use okayness. So it's not always like super pleasurable and maybe like this sense of joy or bliss, which can feel really hard to access, but it can be more just kind of like an okayness, like a right in the middle, feeling just okay. I'm okay to be here. I'm okay to welcome this level of intensity of emotion or a thought and how that's feeling. So working with an inner resource or safe space can be really key, and I encourage that. And with those practices, it's important to know we can weave it in each time we practice, and practicing it often, even just in little doses throughout the day, can help to nourish that so it's more accessible when these challenging things pop up. Lastly, and which we'll be exploring today in our yoga nidra practice, is opposites. So when the challenging messengers arise, we can work with opposites, or kind of the idea of the absence of. And so I want to just briefly mention kind of those little juicy bits on those, and then we'll dive right into the practice. So thank you for hanging with me. This is, I think, is really important when working with some of the challenging things that might be coming in now during this time. So working with the opposites initially, it's not to shut down that initial messenger or that challenging experience you might be having. It's simply to kind of open the lens, because at that point you're kind of caught in the intensity, so it can feel like you're really zoomed in and really laser focused. So the opposite gives you a moment to kind of turn and look and open attention wider to see that there's a whole range of experience here that I'm having. And even though I might be feeling intense grief, there's also an opposite that's present. And that might happen on a conceptual level. So you might sense and kind of note and name like, oh, I'm feeling grief or I'm feeling overwhelm, and how it's feeling in the body. And then have this immediate kind of opposite going, what is that natural arising opposite of grief or sadness? And that might be okayness, right? It doesn't have to be happiness. It might be, but you can work with kind of just that middle ground, that sense of okay. So okayness might be over there, it might be happiness, it might be laughter, it might be joy, whatever that opposite might be, but also how it feels. So we don't want to just stick with it on a cognitive level. We really want to feel it land in the body. So how does it shape our breath? Do we notice our body kind of getting heavier and relaxing in, or kind of tightening and waking up? So we want to always come back and pay attention to how it's feeling in the body. So we can work with that opposite, or the question might be, if this were absent, what might you be experiencing? And that may or may not seem the same as an opposite to you. And so I will just kind of drop that in the practice, and I invite you just to see what happens. See if there is an opposite, or if this was, no longer the case, if this were absent, what would what would be here? What would I be experiencing? What would I be feeling? So that will be some of what you'll experience in the practice. So do begin to shift into your settling in time. If you need to take a transitional stretch, or maybe, we're all on mute except for me, you might want to yawn or sound or hum. And my name is Denny Shea Martinez, and I'm grateful to be sharing this Yoga Nidra practice with you. So feel yourself settling in to whatever support, whatever seat, whatever reclining or lying down position you find yourself in. And making any last minute adjustments to be comfortable. Knowing that your comfort is very important. It's an initial offering to your body and your nervous system, and also your heart, of a sense of well-being and support. And also an act of self-love for taking this time for yourself to connect with yourself and all of these different layers, your personality, your emotions, your body, and your breath. And to return home, knowing that all of these messengers will arise to point you back to deeper truths. One in which there's a sense of connection, unconditional love, a sense of equanimity and peace. And this is a deep felt sense, like an unshakable ground within us that has been present through all of our life's experiences, and now is our opportunity to remember and to connect and to steep in that sense of well-being. So feel the supports nourishing you, offering comfort and ease. As you begin to feel into any intentions that are present. You might be working with some challenging messengers. Maybe there's a emotion that keeps visiting you, or a thought, or a memory. Maybe it's a particular place in the body that is experiencing pain or distress. So your intention might be to welcome and nurture these challenging messengers, or just remaining open to whatever wants to emerge in your practice. Whatever your intention might be, silently affirming that to yourself a few times. Letting this be an internal mantra that provides focus for the mind. So as you feel your attention a bit more gathered, come home to the center of the chest. And as you let attention rest here, you might sense or feel your heart beating. Or perhaps the gentle rise and release of your chest as you're breathing. Just become aware of this space in the center of the chest and any messengers of sensation that might be present. And as you linger here for the next several breaths, letting that welcoming presence come online, moving to the foreground, and allowing any other messengers to arise spontaneously. Perhaps an emotion, perhaps a feeling tone. What is here in the chambers of the spiritual heart that wants to be connected to? Keeping your attention soft, open, and spacious. Know that there's nothing here that we need to create. That whatever we're meant to experience in this time will reveal itself to us. As you feel that rhythmic breath moving in and out of the body, sensing this heart center space. Just feel the body breathing itself. And noticing how this breath too is a movement in your awareness that is arising and unfolding and dissolving, going through its phases, ebbing and flowing, just like our body sensations and our emotions and thoughts. Just become familiar and at home with this ebb and flow with your breath. So sense as the breath moves from the outside in, as it touches the nostril floors and the back of the throat, the interior of the torso. And as you exhale, get a sense for the body settling as this life force energy moves out of the body, releasing through the nose. In-breath invites fresh life force energy into the body. And the exhale, beginning that surrender, and maybe perhaps lingering at the bottom of the exhale for a moment or two in that still quietude. And feeling the light, bright in-breath, expanding, opening through the whole of the body from the head to the toes and the toes to the head. Get a sense for the whole body breathing. As you continue to welcome this sense of the breath, this natural ebb and flow, allowing a settling and a softening, a sense of ease and well-being through the mouth, as the tongue relaxes in the floor of the mouth. Sense the ceiling of the mouth, the inner ears and outer ears. All outer sounds and inner sounds coming alive in your awareness. That gentle, continual flow of breath moving in and out of the nose. The sensation and any other messengers behind the eyes. Following back behind the eyes, sensing and welcoming messengers in the skull, scalp, crown of the head, back of the head. Sensing the shoulders, the arms, and the hands. For a couple of cycles of breath, linger in the hands and notice the sensation in the palms and how that sensation is transforming and ebbing and flowing just like the breath. Feeling the hands vibrant and alive in your awareness. Back up through the arms to the shoulders, feeling the upper back and the chest. Right side ribs and left side ribs. Sensation through the abdominal wall. The navel space, like a brilliant sun radiating sensation. Deep into the low back and low spine. Feel the pelvis and the hips and that ebb and flow of breath. How transformation of sensation is happening here in the pelvis and hips. The upper legs and knees. Lower legs and ankles. As you sense your feet and your toes, you might simultaneously welcome a feeling of well-being and okayness. A sense of ground and support, feeling rooted. Feeling the feet and the toes, the legs, the torso, shoulders, arms, and hands, neck, head, and face. From that welcoming, witnessing presence that is loving and unconditional, feel the whole body and all of the messengers of sensation, all that you are now aware of. The body breathing itself. Attuning to various qualities of messengers and sensations, such as lightness, heaviness, coolness, and warmth. Sensing space, sensing gathered and settled. All of these feeling tones experienced as sensation from the radiant field of the body. As it feels right for you, you might welcome in a particular emotion or thought, or any other messenger you have perceived to be challenging. Inviting it into your guest house, offering it these next few minutes for some deep unconditional listening. There might be a spontaneous emotion that is knocking at your door. So just sense what is most calling, what feels the most important to meet in this moment. And as you invite it in, notice how it comes alive in the body. So peeling away the label that you've given this particular emotion or messenger, and feeling it. Where do you feel it in the body? Everywhere? Perhaps somewhere specific? How do you feel it? Are there particular textures, temperatures? Is this messenger rough or smooth? Sharp or dull? Heavy or light? So meeting this messenger as sensation. How and where do you experience it in the body? Know that the inner resource of well-being, the sense of ease, is available to you anytime. Can touch in, take a moment, sense this experience is here too. Then touch back into this messenger of emotion that might be a bit intense. Whatever is arising in you in this moment, continuing to meet and welcome. And then you might try on a practice of opposites here, if it feels right, identifying and sensing an opposite to this messenger. There might be an initial labeling or noting of an opposite, but I encourage you to really feel your way. Also, feel the opposite. How and where does that light up in the body? Or perhaps if this original messenger were absent, what would you be experiencing? So just see what feels right for you in this time. Knowing that all that is unfolding is okay and is happening in the ground of your well-being, this sense of okayness that is present moment to moment, even now as you welcome these messengers. Sense of well-being shining through, a ground of being that is unconditionally meeting these messengers. As you feel attention shifting, you move back and forth between these pairs of opposites, or the original messenger and the absence of. Just letting attention move back and forth a few times between these opposites of experience, really feeling into the body, the aliveness of the experience. And there will come a time where you'll welcome both experiences simultaneously. So feeling both the original messenger and the opposite or the absence of, can you hold both? Can you feel both? Just noticing how this acts on the body and mind. However this experience is unfolding is perfect. And setting all of that free, gathering attention to the center of the chest once again, as if residing in the caves of the heart, the spiritual heart that is unconditioned, that loves purely, without expectation. Just let yourself rest here for these next few minutes of silent reflection. Seeing your experience now for these next few minutes through the eyes of the heart. I promise I will call you back when it is time. Feeling the sound caressing the body, moving from the outside in, just as the breath moves from the outside in. Feeling the desire to reawaken. Feeling some full or deeper breaths coming back into the body, light, bright inhalation, expanding through the chest, the ribs, the belly. Feel yourself emerging from the caves of the heart, refreshed, restored. Allowing yourself for some transitional movements or stretching, whatever you need to do to return to a more wakeful state. This concludes our formal practice of Yoga Nidra. Please make sure you are fully awake and present in your body. These practices can be very grounding and relaxing. So if you're feeling any heaviness, please do some movements or some stretching. You might get outside, take some nice, deep, fresh breaths. Just making sure you're feeling yourself really present and awake. Thank you so much for listening.